Hi, Eva. We'll be starting here in just a moment.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you for informing me.
Right when my phone hits 12, I'll call it. All right, it is 12 o'clock. I will call this meeting to order. Can I get a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair. Mike Labar, Matt Simus, Mark Gonzalez,
Here. Can't hear you,
Deirdre
Eva.
Sullivan, Ken Eklund,
Here.
Mike Scatini, Jason Smith, John Bailey,
Here.
Marvin Borzini.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be going into closed session. We have two items. We have pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D2 and D4. And item B, pursuant to Government Code Section 54957B1. Is there any member of the public who make any comments on the closed session items? Again, I'll ask, is there any member of the public who'd like to make any comments on the closed session items? Hearing and seeing none, we'll now recess into closed session.
Okay. Let's see.
We'll be starting back. All right, we're back from closed session. Is Agency Council, was there any closed session announcements?
No, there's no reportable actions today.
Thank you. All right, with that, will you join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. All right, we'll move on to our presentation. It'll be Amy giving us an update on the groundwater monitoring program and extraction reporting timelines.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the board. Amy Woodrow, a senior hydrologist with the agency, and I'm happy to share this presentation with you today. I'll just pull up my screen here. And as you stated, I'll be giving you an update here on the groundwater monitoring program and the extraction reporting timelines. As you're well aware, we now have a new ordinance that is covering the groundwater extraction program as well as multiple other agency monitoring programs. That ordinance went into effect as of the beginning of November, and it also included adoption of the groundwater monitoring program manual in tandem with the ordinance, which in the manual includes a lot of the details about how the programs are implemented. And this, just as a refresher, the groundwater monitoring program encompasses 4 different programs at the agency, one of which is the well registration. And then there's the groundwater extraction or the GEMS program, and our groundwater elevation and groundwater quality monitoring. So all under that umbrella of the GMP. And as just a refresher again, the area that the GMP is currently being applied is a combination of the agency's Zone 2C and the extent of the subbasins that are managed by the Salinas Valley Basin GSA. So that encompasses the subbasins that are listed there, and the whole area combined is shown on the figure on the right there. So it's an area that's a little larger than Zone 2C, but does include the whole area of Zone 2C. And there have, as a result of the new ordinance, we have changes to the well registration and the groundwater extraction reporting requirements. I'm going to kind of give some highlights from both of those here. The well registration program, we'll start with that. All wells in that defined geographic area now are required to be registered with the agency. In the past, there was a subset of wells, ones that reported extraction data were required to register, but we now have a larger area and a larger there are more varieties of different wells that have to be registered. So everything from small domestic wells, industrial wells, municipal wells, regardless of the discharge pipe or extraction limit, they all need to register with the agency. We are in the process of setting up an online portal for that. And in the interim, we are using the same form we have in the past. It's available on the agency's website. And per the ordinance, registration of a well is required within 30 days of completing construction of a new well or within, upon request from the agency. So staff will be reaching out to people to initiate that registration for existing wells. And then we'll also be, we've tried to streamline our communications with the county health department so that we also become aware of when new wells are being constructed so we can reach out promptly in those cases as well. And on the groundwater extraction reporting side, there are kind of a few more changes here. The new requirement is that wells in that same defined geographic area, anyone pumping more than 2 acre-feet per year has to report extraction data to the agency through our online GEMS portal. So it's the same, same portal, same website that people have been using in the past. The manual describes the different methods for tracking data and the frequency with which data has to be tracked. And we are rolling out this extraction reporting requirement in a few different phases. So For people who will be reporting data for 2024, so data that was pumped in 2024, that applies to people who have historically reported groundwater extractions to the agency. So it's, for a lot of folks, it's business as usual. They've been recording their data. They're going to report it to us in the same manner that they were used to. And then at the same time, we are starting to reach out in partnership with the Salinas Valley Basin GSA to people who need to start collecting data, in these last few months of 2024, because they'll be asked to report data to us next year in 2025. So that first batch of people, a lot of them are in those new geographic areas where the GEMS program did not apply in the past. So it applies to agricultural wells, municipal, industrial wells, and then also larger water systems. So any water system that has 15 or more connections, those folks, so anyone in that new geographic space or people in, who maybe didn't have to report in the past, those are the folks we're reaching out to, starting now and saying you need to start recording your data so you can report it in the future. And then in 2025, sort of the final phase, we'll be reaching out to smaller water systems with 5 to 14 connections. We'll be reaching out to them, midway through 2025 to let them know that they need to start collecting data to report in 2026. So trying to roll it out in a phased way so it's a little bit more manageable. And there is, in terms of actually reporting the data and the deadlines for it, we're trying to get the message out to folks that this is a little bit of a transitional year that we have, that we're in right now for GEMS timelines. When you look closely at the manual, it describes a deadline of November 1st to report extraction data. That was not feasible to implement this year given the timeline of the ordinance. So what we are doing is, kind of doing an interim measure for this year. I'll get to the timelines here in just a minute. In the past, the agency allowed reporting of data from November through February 15th. This year, in the kind of the area marked by the red arrow there, we opened the portal last week to allow people to start submitting extraction data to us, and it's open until January 10th. So it's a little bit shorter of a timeline than we've had in the past. I acknowledge we've gotten a lot of comments and feedback from people. It's a little bit of a tricky timeline. There are some holidays in there. I fully recognize that we are, needing to move to these new timelines that are defined in the ordinance. So this is what we have to work with for this year. So we'll be closing the portal for data submittal on January 10th of 2025. In future years, as I mentioned, we are reaching out to people to let them know, that they need to start collecting data and when we'll be asking them to submit that data to us. That is going, again, we're trying to work in tandem with the Salinas Valley Basin GSA, trying to communicate to people in a lot of different ways. We'll be doing mailings, emails for people who we have that with, getting information out through our websites, through, set up different, standing committees or other organizations trying to share that information to let people know what will be expected for next year. So starting for water year 2025, so that'll be, the data we'll be looking for next year. We'll be asking people to submit data on the water year basis, so October to September. The data portal will be open during the month of October, so there will be just that 1 month to submit data, and all data will be due to the agency by November 1st. And, we've made this change in the timeline for a number of reasons. The shift to the water year is trying to align data with kind of all of the other data sources and the ways that a lot of data are reported both at the agency and through the different GSAs to meet their needs. And then the timelines are also, aligned, trying to shift from what has historically just been a water resources agency program to a regulatory program that's now providing data to a lot of different entities. So just to kind of put it all together on one slide here with the timelines, here we are over here in November. We went through a short period of doing administrative changes for people where the portal was kind of partially open in October and the early part of November. We've switched now into the portal being fully open for people to submit extraction data with that January 10th deadline. And then at the same time, again, working on that outreach to people who are going to need to start collecting data so they'll be prepared to report in 2025. And then this, this sort of setup of September into October for reporting data will continue into the future. So there's a lot of information. We've tried to get a lot of information out on the agency's website, also through mailings that are going out, as part of the groundwater extraction program, information about the ordinance, making the manual available. There's a program page with frequently asked questions that's available on both the agency's website and the SVB GSA website. And then staff are available by phone and email for questions, as people have already started submitting data, which is great. It's great to get that in early if you can. We are trying to be very available and accessible, again, recognizing that there is kind of a shorter timeline and things are changing, trying to be there for people when they have questions. With that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to respond to any questions from the board or public.
Thank you, Amy. That was a great presentation. I'll start with board members. Any questions or comments? I did have just a couple, Amy, and it's more on that where you showed the one-page registration. Mm-hmm. And so that's the interim before the portal gets up and running, and that would be for new construction of wells and then those that will be required to report their well information?
That's right. Yes. So there's a work stream that the agency is working on with the Salinas Valley Basin GSA to identify wells in areas where the agency hasn't historically collected data. So we're trying to utilize information that, that we already know about, maybe through well permits or other data sources, to reach out to people, and say, we believe you have a well, can you verify, is this information correct? And then, request that they register with us. So we're trying to be proactive about identifying those locations. And, I think it will be easier once we have the portal in place, but as an interim measure, we're trying to keep the data coming in however we can right now.
Okay, and that's great, because I think that answers the next question I have, because for me, the things that kind of popped off was, where they're asking for the kilowatt hours per acre foot. That would be already on file that you'd be transferring over and asking for verification. Those types of, those particular items, and then the motor information as well, that would something be that's already on file.
That's right. And okay. We are, we're not asking people to re-register. If they're already registered with the agency, we may reach out, and just, again, say, here's what we have on file. Is this correct? Does anything need to be changed? But you're right.
All right, I appreciate that. And then I know you already mentioned that, but you're there to help everybody move through this process and these changes. So if anyone had questions, they would call you, call the agency. Is that how it would work? If they couldn't find it on our fact page?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, if you call the agency main line and ask for hydrology staff, you'll get to the folks on our team. There's also that dedicated email. And certainly I'd be happy to field questions as well.
Excellent. All right. Any member of the public like to speak on this item? I see none in chambers. Do we have any online?
No hands raised.
All right. Thank you again, Amy.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to our consent calendar. Does any of the board members want to pull any items for discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to pull item 8.
Item 8. Any other members want to pull any other items? All right. I'm going to go to the public for public comment on consent calendar items 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Is there any member of the public want to speak on any of the consent calendar items 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7? Seeing none in chambers. Do we have any
No
online?
hands raised.
All right. I'll bring that back for action for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Move to approve, Mr. Chair.
And I'll second it.
All right, first with Mark. I'm sorry,
Ken.
Ken. Second with Ken. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Passes unanimously. All right, let's go to item 8. Ken?
Yeah, actually, I'm kind of confused at this. I recall when the original contract came out, it was actually to repair the damage, the fences that were destroyed during the fire down there. But I don't understand how we could go from $125,000 to $425,000. And I understand it's over multiple years, but first of all, concerned with having that large of a jump on just a consent item without any discussion. But actually, and I did read the staff report, but it's not clear why, well, the ranchers, the cattle leases, those folks are required to keep their lease in a stock-tight condition. And that is the way it is right now. So I don't understand why we need to spend $325,000 on fences. I understand we probably have some that need to be worked on, but it just didn't seem like there was any explanation for that.
All right, who would like to take that?
Good afternoon, Jen Bodensteiner, Associate Hydrologist in the Operations Division. So thanks for considering the agreement amendment for maintaining the fence and gate infrastructure around agency lands at the reservoir. So in response, I understand there's concerns. Maybe the staff report could include more detail. We did do a presentation. Mallory Roberts did a presentation to the Finance Committee. We have that presentation available if we wanted to cue through it. But to answer Director Eklund's questions, so we do have fence and gate infrastructure that would definitely go above and beyond that's included for the leasees to maintain. So generally they would be responsible for the boundary fencing, keeping the boundaries stock tight. These targeted areas would be like the entries to the grazing lease ranches, where you have gates that are in excess of 50 to 60 years old that have been in pretty severe disrepair. So we did start that multi-year agreement with Salinas Valley Barbed Wire, and it was started initially to just get after the fence that was needing repair on lease 3A and 3B. That was a result of like some fire damage. We had such success with the contractor and some money available that we decided to expand some of the work under that first initial 100,000. So we did about 70,000 of fire damage fence repair, and then we went after 3 gate areas that were in great need of being repaired. So that would be, there was a gate entry to, we call it lease 5. Lease 1 at Nacimiento, as well as near Heritage Ranch, where we were getting a lot of trespassing. So both lease 1 and Heritage Ranch, a lot of trespassing. So those gates were repaired. So we did $100,000 worth of work last year. And then this year, we'd like to we have some focus areas at San Antonio that get quite a bit of trespassing on the West Shore by Cemetery Cove. And then towards the North Shore, the boundary between our ranch area and the resorts. So right now we have proposals in hand for close to $57,000 worth of fence work, and then $8,000 for each gate. We need 3 gates. So yeah, we're looking at, close to $85,000 in proposed work that we have estimates in hand ready to go. I apologize. This is one of my first times doing a multi-year agreement, so I could have been more clear. where the work that's budgeted, it was 100,000, and then really for this year, it's another 100. But we're hoping in advance then for next year that we would have more money and continue this important work of repairing those gates and fences. And yeah, we're going to have some good news to bring forward on the stock-tight fencing and more cooperation with our lease operators, and hopefully getting some equip money from NRCS and really starting to make some headway on the lease fencing all around. So I hope that answers more than what you wanted. But
yeah, no, that's not actually, that's fine. That explains a whole lot. So we budgeted for this year the work that you're including here, right? We don't need a budget amendment for this?
Correct. There is $100,000 budgeted this fiscal year.
And then, so this will go, I thought it just goes to 26. So I guess it'd be 25 and 26. So there would be 2 more years of that?
This is the second year, so we'd have 1 more year. This contract would expire, in 2026, sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from board members?
So, Jen, were you at the finance meeting?
I was on the Zoom.
So we did things sort of ass backwards at the finance meeting because I had to depart. So we did all the voting early, and then we went through the reports. I missed the budget for Fund 116 report, the budget status and how it lays out. I think if we would have done things in order, I wouldn't have voted for this increase. I would have kept the increase lower and just take it in smaller increments down the road. And we down at the reservoir, we've only done things when we had the money to do it, and that's just been this story. This is a large increase, $325,000. I understand that, things haven't been repaired down there for 60 years. We haven't done things to the dam for 50 years. And that's a little bit more important than the fencing. I know Tom might disagree with me, but it's an issue that I think a little bit more, it just seems like a big increase. We've already got $100,000. The way this budget looks for 24, 25 isn't real pretty. And that's the unfortunate part of the asking for more money. So I'm bad for not doing the report first and then voting on this stuff. But I have a problem with that amount for this year. Next year, I'd like to see it brought down a little bit and do a little bit more next year. But that's my opinion.
Through the chair, so just to clarify, so you're only asking for, in other words, this is a multi-year contract, so you're not asking for us to start spending $325,000 right now.
Correct.
Right. That is, so for 2 more years. So you have the money in the budget to do the 100. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
It says to amend the agreement.
Yeah.
To $425,000.
Over a series of years.
Right.
Not to exceed.
Not to exceed. Yeah.
Yeah, so the
between this
thought
year
there
and next
was with the multi-year agreement, that it saves time and effort and resources to keep coming back for amendment after amendment. We acknowledge that, there's only 100,000 right now budgeted, and next year is questionable, what that amount might be, maybe 0, it may be 225.
That's what I'm worried about, is what we're going to have available for next year.
So if there's none available, then
We don't
finance
spend it. Okay,
would.
that's fine.
Right.
I appreciate it.
If I might, I think it's sort of the analogy is, Congress and when the difference between authorizing funds and appropriating them, and that's sort of where we're at here.
Right. So, okay, so.
Let me take it to public first. Is there any member of the public who'd like to speak on this item? Seeing none in chambers, do we have any online?
No hands raised.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a move staff's recommendation.
Okay. First with Ken, second with Mark. All in favor? Aye. Against? Passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Move on to item 9, consider receiving an update on the implementation of the interim operations plan for San Antonio and Nacimiento reservoirs. Peter? Good afternoon.
Magic here. Only if I, oh, here it is. It's on the desktop. How about that? Thank you, whoever. Thank you. Okay. Good afternoon, Peter Quick, Monterey County Water Resources Agency. Today's action is to consider receiving an update on the 2024 implementation of the Interim Operations Plan, also known as the IOP, for San Antonio and Nacimiento reservoirs, and provide direction to staff as appropriate. There's no financial impact for this action, and so far, on October 28th, agency staff provided an update on the plan to the Reservoir Operations Advisory Committee, so some of you will be familiar with some of these slides. And just to review the IOP, this was a plan that was adopted by the board in November 2022, following a stakeholder, kind of a long stakeholder input process. It's designed to address specific conditions where the flow prescription did not meet its intended goals over the first 13 years of operation of the Salinas Valley Water Project with the flow prescription. And it provides supplemental adaptive management to the existing flow prescription where the habitat, while the habitat conservation plan is under development, hence the name interim while the habitat conservation plan is under development. And just looking at the plan itself, the goal is to enhance steelhead migration opportunities in the absence of flow prescription triggers, again, to address flow prescription shortcomings and related National Marine Fisheries Service concerns during especially drier periods. It allows agency staff discretion to respond quickly to modify reservoir releases to take advantage of storm events prior to April 1st of each year. And during the operational period, which is January, February, and March, when specified triggers are met, the agency may make releases at the general manager's discretion if staff feels there's a reasonable probability of succeeding to provide habitat conditions with the plan. And so just as a reminder, this is from the flow prescription, or this is kind of a summary of existing periods of operational environmental requirements under the flow prescription. And we've got that blue box highlighted there. That's really the period that this IOP is addressing. We were falling short in terms of adult steelhead upstream migration, and specifically this plan enables that time window to be expanded back to January, so January, February, and March, not just February and March. And then this table, many of you have probably seen this before. These are upstream passage days, 2010 to 2022, so the first 13 years. And I've got, so if you look at the, it breaks it down by year types: wet, wet, normal, normal, dry, and then that third column there shows the passage days that we need to be averaging on a 10-year average basis by year type. And if you look at dry normal years, we should be averaging 16 passage days. And looking over to the right, the average number, we had 4 dry normal years during that time window, and we didn't have any passage days in any of those years. So that's really what this was addressing. And passage days are as defined in the flow prescription, so that's 260 CFS at the Salinas River near Chular for 5 days or more when the river mouth is open. Okay. This is some details in terms of operations. I won't go through all of it, but there's just some important factors here. I'm willing to talk about any of it if you like, but you know, big ones are we're only going to make bypass flows. We're not going to release water from storage under the IOP, and we're not going to bring the reservoirs down to minimum pool through an IOP action. So let's just look at the first 2 years of implementation. 2023, on January 5th of 2023, all the triggers were met. We had reservoir inflow exceeding releases, so we could make bypass flows if we needed to. That was the case starting on December 11th. And then we had continuous flow from the Arroyo Seco to the Salinas as of December 31st. The lagoon opened on January 5th. That was really the fourth trigger. That other trigger, fewer than 16 passage days had occurred. That's kind of obvious. So all four triggers were met as of January 5th, but it was also very clear that we had some big weather coming, so we didn't really need to take any action. Atmospheric rivers provided what turned out to be 85 consecutive days where the passage threshold was met or exceeded, January 5th to March 31st, so no action was needed in that case. So that was 2023. 2024, all triggers were met a little later in the season, February 1st. The one that was the last one to be met was number 2, continuous flow established from the Arroyo Seco to the Salinas. So we actually did. We assessed, we did a watershed assessment, assessed conditions, determined that we had a good chance of succeeding with an IOP action, initiated a release of 300 CFS on February 1st, and then quickly it became apparent that natural storm activity and natural flows were going to bring us up to that upstream passage threshold. So within 2 days, the IOP action was terminated February 3rd, and natural flows provided what turned out to be 57 consecutive days of upstream passage meeting that threshold. And this complicated, kind of ugly graph, you know, if you want to really get into it, there it is. But basically, if you look at that, so here we have daily flow on the vertical x-axis there, and then a timeline on the y-axis, and or vice versa. And if you look at that orange line, that's Salinas River near Chular mean daily flow. We want that to be over that horizontal red line to meet upstream passage, the upstream passage threshold as defined in the flow prescription. And so we weren't there on February 1st, so that little green area there is the 3 days where we made a release. That's the time when we made the release. Quickly, the flow got over that red line, so we stopped the release. And as you can see, the orange line that orange squiggly line was well above the red line for a long time after. So that's kind of a summary of what was going on there. Yeah, and in summary, the IOP was adopted and implemented in water year 2023. Triggers were met in 2023. Triggers were also met in 2024. And in 2024, as I said, we made that release, but it was terminated within a couple days. We've had a lot of passage days in both of those years. Nonetheless, staff continuing with the same triggers going forward while the HCP is under development. So again, today's action is to consider receiving an update on the 2024 IOP for San Antonio and Nacimiento reservoirs and provide direction to staff as appropriate. That concludes my report, and happy to take questions.
Thank you, Peter. That was a great presentation. Board members, questions or comments? Mike, and then I'll go to Ken.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, Peter. Have you measured the success? Not in terms of fish passage, but in terms of fish?
Well, I mean, we haven't had any dry, normal years since the implementation of the IOP, and that's really the target year type we're going for. So, you know, I mean, one way I would say we have succeeded is in just being able to shut it down when it's clear that it's not needed. So we're not just making a release and letting it go, where we initiated a release this year, and as soon as it was clear that conditions would be met by nature, we were able to shut it down with just less than 2 days of 300 CFS release. 2023, we didn't need to make a release at all. So I think the triggers coupled with the watershed assessment, just because the triggers are met doesn't mean we're going to take action. Triggers are met, we assess the watershed, and we make a recommendation. And so I think that's working because I think,
No, and I commend you for that. You guys are moving on the fly and making decisions on the fly appropriately. But again, what kind of fish are we getting? What I know we spend a substantial amount of money monitoring fish in the Arroyo Seco and the lagoons, below the dams. So have we seen any increase in fish?
I mean, I think I can't really answer that question. I might turn to Jason on that, but I think it's a little early. This is just 2 wet winters. And yeah, there is ongoing monitoring. I know there are also fish passage studies that could change those thresholds, but Jason, you want to chime in here?
Great. Good afternoon. Jason Demers with the Water Resources Agency. To address the fish question, we do have some ongoing monitoring, but we don't have any ongoing migration monitoring. So we're not running the fish weirs like we have in past years, largely due to a lack of effectiveness and difficulty, high costs for keeping those running, and lack of opportunities in some cases to fish those. What we're doing currently is we're doing index reach monitoring in the Arroyo Seco, in the Nacimiento and San Antonio, and then we're doing work in the Salinas River Lagoon. So none of those types of surveys actually measure fish migration, just presence in different locations in the watershed. So we don't have necessarily fish passage numbers to go along with the flow numbers that Peter is presenting. What we're doing is in following the purpose of the flow prescription is we're providing those passage opportunities so the fish can take advantage of them when they're in the system.
So maybe I'm being naive, but I'm making the assumption that if we're increasing passage, or that there has been an increase in passage opportunities, that therefore it would translate to more actual fish, and that we would be able to count those fish in the lagoon. I mean, I know we're monitoring all the time. They were just recently in the lagoon monitoring for the tidewater goby, and I'd have to, in the off season when it isn't wintertime, when we don't have the constraints of winter storms, et cetera, that we would be able to witness an increase in a population, either mature or immature, one way or the other.
That is our hope. Steelhead do live and move through our system on a 2 to 3 year life cycle. So the steelhead that would be coming up into the system this past winter would have been steelhead that could have left the system 2 to 3 years prior to that. So there are a number of factors, considering ocean condition and previous water years that are all in play. But that's the ultimate goal, is to find larger numbers in different parts of the watershed. But as
I'd love
far
to
as
be able to see this get tied back with fish bio eventually, as we continue to implement this plan, and show that there's actually some fruit to our labor.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to clarify the cost issue, the monitoring we've performed over the last couple of years has been grant funded through the development of the HCP. So agency funds have been really minimal over the past few years on fish monitoring. And during the HCP process, we are actually looking at more efficient ways to perform that monitoring, things that might be a little more cost effective in the future. So we have not installed the weir near the SRDF over the past at least 2-3 years. And we're reevaluating our monitoring strategy right now through the HCP.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation, and thanks, Jason, for your answers and stuff. I think what I'm most excited about, I mean, the staff put a ton of work into this, is that we have control. We have more control over how we're doing our releases than we did before. I think that's awesome. And I'm hoping that, this is hopefully a model for the negotiations that when the HCP conditions are in, that they would model something like this that says, hey, if it's not going to work, turn it off, or we don't need it. It's unnecessary. And I think most importantly, using the bypass flows. I think that the Water Management District would wish that they had that condition. They're actually their reservoirs operated for the fish, basically. Essentially, all the releases, most of the releases have to do with that. So, good job on that. And yeah, the whole monitoring thing. I know that was a real sore subject because we spent a ton of money on it, and the scientists told us at the time that it was going to be very complicated for a braided river like that to do it. Every time we get a flow that's good enough for the fish, it trashes our equipment. The river, when they're going, is so, the turbidity is so high that there's very few options on that. So it'd be interesting to see what you guys come up with. But I think that generally what they're going to have to do is there's going to have to be periodic checks of the river itself, the Arroyo Seco River itself, and you can do a reach with 100 yards and do a little electric fishing and stuff. That would be not us. That would be the resource agencies like the Fish and Wildlife and NOAA Fisheries. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Deidre?
Yeah, thank you. Great report. Just along those lines, so it sounds like with all this, we still don't have direct evidence that the conditions are right, but the fish are actually migrating. We're not able to count them or see them, it sounds like.
We're not able to see them in the action of migrating. We have in the past, when we were operating the weir near the SRDF, we have found some fish moving upstream, and then we have seen evidence of some in rotary screw traps in the Arroyo Seco and Nacimiento in the past, but we haven't been using those methods over the past couple of years. So currently we're looking for them in the parts of the watershed where we expect them to ultimately show up for their spawning and rearing activities. And we are finding some fish in the Arroyo Seco and some in the Nacimiento. This year, we don't have the final report back from Fish Bio, but this fall we found very few, I don't believe any steelhead in our monitoring, but it's a very, we are doing index reach monitoring, which is similar to what Director Eklund was just explaining, where we're monitoring for fish in certain reaches of the rivers that we can repeat from year to year. And so it's effective if the fish are in the area that we're monitoring at the time we're performing the monitoring. So it's not comprehensive. It's a snapshot of what's happening in that one location at that one time. But counts are low this year.
Okay. Well, it's not, for migratory fish, it's not surprising with 3 years of drought, prior to this. The reason why I ask is I volunteer for the Carmel River Steelhead Association, and this year we had 92 people volunteer to collect fish, move fish, but we also pit tagged almost 1,000 fish with volunteers. I did about 100 fish. And they're actually seeing the fish migrate. They have the sensory networks out there. And so it's promising, but it sure would be great to have some type of infrastructure and maybe at some point, pit tagging. But I would say it'd be interesting to look into the nonprofits and the people that can help support that, because the cost is huge, but there's a lot of people that actually really want to do it for free.
Okay, no, that's a great suggestion.
Before you go, Mike, you had something? And then.
Yep, Peter and Jason, great report. More information is good information, especially as we're developing this HCP. So with what you come up with, and hopefully I'd settle for a normal year. I forgot what normal's like, but if we get rain this weekend, we get rain this weekend. And go through the 24-25 year, so that would give you 3 years that you could see the flows in the river. We're going to have another drought. When it comes, I don't know, just like another flood. We're going to have another flood. But gathering all this information is good because what goes into this HCP is going to be used for the future. We want to have information that is logical, that is scientific, factual, that we're going to live by. If the purpose of the release is potential, we got some issues there. We got to show proof that it is actually doing something good. And Arroyo Seco, there's fish up there. It's the problem I guess I see in the big picture is whenever you dam up a river, now you have an artificial river. Well, we're trying to make a river back to where it was, and you can never do that with a dam. Any dammed river in the United States or in the world, you can never, it's an artificial river now. So, like I said, gather the information, and hopefully we get good information that we can put in HCP and show that it's worthwhile. Because if it's not, we got to think about, what we need to do next, what our next plan of attack is. So, thank you.
Mike, you had something else?
Yeah, I love what Director Dietrich talked about using the nonprofits, and especially about moving the fish and moving them to the habitat that they need to be, rather than guessing if they're going to actually get there or not. So, I would encourage our staff to look into that. And then I'm going to beat a bit of a dead horse here, but there is one fish that I know is in that river system that eats all the steelhead, and that's the striped bass. And the striped bass are also in the Carmel River. And our Fish and Game and NOAA Fisheries and everybody else continues to protect those fish to the detriment of all of our efforts here. So just going to jump on soapbox for a second.
All right, before I go to public, again, thank you for the work. For me, the importance of this is, especially moving forward, is having flexibility and not a rigid schedule to meet. And I think that conversation, this is showing that flexibility is actually something that can work and should be incorporated in any future, anything for environmental releases. So I appreciate all the work on that.
Mr. Chair, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm just about to.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, you're getting into the direct staff, and where I was going to say is, as they say on a ship, steady as she goes. We continue to do this. I want to just make sure we don't miss that part of the item on there.
So is there any member of the public who would like to speak on this item? Seeing none in chambers, do we have any online?
No hands raised.
I'll bring this back to the board for action to receive the update.
I'll make a motion to accept the proposal.
First with John. Second with Marvin. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Thank you, everyone. Passes unanimously. All right, so we have our informational items for our calendars for November, December, January. Any board members have any questions on that? We're not there yet. Any questions on the calendar? All right.
Chair, as of this afternoon, we did cancel P&A for December.
Okay. All right, with no questions, any member of the public can speak on the calendar events. See none in chambers. Any online?
No hands raised.
Move on to our general manager's report. Ara?
Good afternoon. We'll start with the personnel update. So with respect to the work that we've been doing to develop an agency-unique compensation philosophy, we've finalized a draft with the county's HR department. We've also finalized our scope of work for the compensation and class study. The next step for HR to take that we'll just have to wait on is the meet and confer process that they have to do under the MOU with unions. But once that's complete, then we will be able to issue the contract and commence the compensation and class study. So slow and steady progress there. On personnel, we were able to post the solicitation for the dam maintenance superintendent on November 8th. That solicitation will be open for approximately 30 days, closing in early December. And I think it's important for us to be clear that that is a South County position. And so that's, where we want to be advertising and focusing our energies. Lastly, 2 congratulations to Tanya Lewis, who was competitively promoted to the Accountant 1 position here recently, and so we offer her a round of applause. And congratulations to Jared Hansen, one of our Laurel Yard maintenance workers who recently obtained his crane operator's certification. So good for him to taking that initiative and doing the extra work to add value to himself and to the agency. And so we appreciate those extra efforts and that good work by both. And so I will pause there on personnel.
Any questions on personnel?
Moving on to dam safety funding, the agency did submit an application to the Department of Water Resources Dam Safety and Climate Resilience Local Assistance Program. I don't know why we're so bad at naming things. Let's add 10 more words in there. But we did submit an application requesting grant support for the low-level outlet works project at the San Antonio Dam Spillway. This is a project that we have attended to here recently, given the work that Santa Clara Valley Water District has gone through and their reconstruction of the Anderson Dam. One of the things that was required of them was the modification of their low-level outlet works. So in anticipation, and that could be a condition put upon us, we have begun to think through what those steps would look like. In short, we've broken that down into 9 sub-projects, currently estimating somewhere between $7 and $9 million over a 3-year period. And so we currently expect to hear back from the Department of Water Resources sometime in the January time period. Senator Laird did reach out and offered to provide a letter of support, which we greatly appreciate and readily accepted. And in particular, focusing on our request to lower the match. The grant has provisions that allows for a lower match, and we believe we meet those conditions, and so we're requesting a 22% match rather than a 50% match, and that was something the Senator had echoed in his letter, so thank you to him. And we're also reaching out to Assemblymember Rivas and Addis and San Luis Obispo County to see if they're interested in providing support letters as well. So that's where we are on dam safety funding.
Okay, and I just want to really highlight Senator Laird wrote an excellent letter on our behalf. It was well worth the read, and his knowledge and experience from all the different agencies he's worked with, I think made a great case to lower that to a 22% match instead of 50. So thank you. Go ahead and continue.
Yeah, turning our attention to CSIP, we held a growers workshop on October 30th at the Farm Bureau. This was something that was born out of this last spring's budgeting process where I don't know that we had the first growers workshop, but certainly one that, the first one in a long time. And some of the feedback that we had received from that workshop included, explaining to us the importance of this time of year for the growers in the CSIP region, and I imagine throughout the valley in terms of negotiations about leases, negotiations about sales contracts, and how important it is for them to get previews as they're thinking about what next year's business decisions look like. And so that was very much our aim. At the workshop, we flashed back on accomplishments of the 2024 year. We talked about the status of current projects in the 25 fiscal year and provided some preliminary views of the 26 fiscal year. Among the 2024 accomplishments was beginning work on the booster pump replacements, the work that we've done in terms of improving the meter calibration and in particular the transmission of that data electronically through the remote monitoring units. We talked about the hydrodynamic modeling, the SRDF work that has gone on now through 2 fiscal years. And then, looked at where our fiscal year end 24 budget and estimated expenditures ended up. Again, emphasizing the continuing impact to fund balance. Reviewed where we were in terms of the current budget, current rates, the work that's supporting, and then flashing forward, started to talk about upcoming the initiation of the master planning proposal. We expect to have the RFP for that consultant out this month, and with the aim of having someone on board by the April-May of 25 timeframe, likely a 1.5 year process, and really aiming for that to help inform what the longer arc looks like in terms of how do we maintain this system reliably going on and into the future. And so that was well received. We talked about, this was a conversation that came up in the spring again, reserve policies. So talked about why we would have reserves, how reserves would be incorporated into the CSIP rate structure, different types of reserves that one would hold, the purpose for operating reserves and debt reserves and so forth. We do have draft reserve policy we're beginning to work on, and we'll be in a position to begin introducing that for, feedback here early in the new year. And then we turned our attention to, what might a range of water delivery fees look like for the next fiscal year. Here we really tried to emphasize this rate structure issue that we've got because of the way the rate structures are set up for CSIP, and I say that generically, right? There's the 3 funds. They're largely land-based assessments. Prop 218 is very arduous and expensive to change, and the only knob, if you will, that we have that's readily available in terms of meeting the current needs is the water delivery fee. Unfortunately, big changes in that fee really result in small changes in overall revenue. And so it was important to reflect that to the growers so they can understand why there's that difference between, how much we're requesting to change the fee versus the difference it's making. And then we talked about some scenarios, right, in terms of work that we could do, priorities that the agency has identified, but also priorities that we've heard from the community. We're currently working on a well replacement project that was partially funded. We will need approximately $400,000 in the next fiscal year in order to finish that project out. That would mean raising the current water delivery fee from $45 to $65, round numbers. That's the kind of changes that it would take to finish this project out. We've heard a lot of interest in starting another well. And so, we presented a scenario, well, if we funded that over 2 years as well, that would mean a fee of $102.50 per acre foot. And so beginning to try and gauge where that willingness and ability is in terms of the community, and also recognizing that there are a number of high priority projects that we need to move forward. Finalizing the Title 22 permit update, the master planning process, the 21 kV switchgear design and upgrades. There are other high priority projects there. So we reviewed this list, received good feedback, got some good questions. I intend to do a follow-up letter just trying to respond to some of the questions we've got, kind of provide these, parameters that we're looking forward to as we move forward. And then we provided to the growers a tentative schedule in terms of, how the next budgeting process will work out beginning in January and moving through June. And then also reminded them of the various ways that they can engage with the agency, both directly, reaching out to staff and then through the various committees processes. So all in all, I found it, a constructive workshop for staff. I think we continue to learn. And so hopefully our services will continue to improve as a result. Director Bailey and Director Scatini were both, in-house, and so I don't know if they want to offer some color commentary, but that's my overview of the workshop.
Board members have any comments?
Yeah. So the 22 stakeholders that are part of CSIP, I think we had 90% of them attend. The woe is me endangerment of all these funds, 131, 132, 134, basically follows with any of our water resource funds. 116, they're all in trouble. So we got to prioritize, especially out in CSIP. It's a 25-year-old project. Things tend to wear out. When we started this project 30 years ago, we had 22 wells, supplemental wells. We're down to 7. I think that was the last count. 8 is iffy. And the reason we had 22 supplemental wells was if the project ever went offline, where we didn't have any effluent water, nothing, we could turn the wells on. That would be enough water volume to irrigate the 12,000 acres. Well, we're down to 8 supplemental wells, and when the next drought hits, those will be relied on for water for the project. We do have money between all 3 funds. There is monies available to finish that one well. The 400,000, it isn't like we don't have it. It is out there. Between all 3 funds, we have $7.5 million split between all 3 funds. So it's a give and take. We're still looking in whether we can borrow one fund, bring it over, utilize that money, and then repay it back. In the old days, we did it quite regularly. Now it's just whether we want to do it in the future. So the dire straits that were set are being set. Granted, we need to do something, but right now, that 12,000 acres is heavily taxed already compared to the rest of the valley. And any more added funds or added taxes to it just takes it out of balance with the rest of the growing areas. So we got to be real cautious, and I think that was a general consensus of the stakeholders out there. We can't afford much more. We're paying $700 an acre right now, just in taxes. So it is something that we've got to watch. We've got to move forward on this, but we got a lot of projects. We got the dams also we need to take care of. That's a whole different issue in itself. We'll get by, but it's going to be probably not as quick as the Water Resource Agency would like to do, but we'll get there, I think. And that's, baby steps are better than no steps at all. So I think that was a general consensus.
Yeah,
Go ahead. My only question is, I see the 3 funds, and then part of the income is grants on each one. Those grants aren't going to be there forever all the time. I mean, I don't understand how that works. I mean, can you count on that as income every year as a grant?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, no, Marvin. So the grants are revenue neutral, right? Revenue equals expense, and yeah.
Yeah, I thought the meeting was very constructive. I think we need to continue to have those meetings with the stakeholders there. We need to continue to build trust with the stakeholders and with our agency, and have full transparency in the dollars that are being spent, the dollars that are being spent with M1, and also the reliability and also future of that project. In the landscape of water in the Salinas Valley has changed dramatically, and with Sigma, I look at this project and I think it's a great start to sustainability, but we're going to have to do more, and that is going to come with trust. And so, we're going to have a CSIP system, part 2, and it's going to happen sooner than later, and we will do it. And having that trust with the stakeholders is going to be paramount to getting it accomplished.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And to that end, we also did inform the growers that we do intend to do another workshop probably in the late February, early March timeframe, so they can see the way, initial budgets are lining up and have plenty of opportunity to weigh in.
Hopefully our books will be closed for the 22-23 year by February.
And I do appreciate you and staff making those connections and providing that information. And hopefully there will be a conversation too, because I think we talk about the budgets for these funds, but we still haven't designated, should there be a reserve, what should those reserves be for? And we need to get that conversation. So I hope when we have the next stakeholder ones, that conversation is getting out there too. It's like, what is the cushion that you want? What is the cushion that is necessary? Because if we spend them all down to zero, which we can, right? That's not a problem. Spend all the excess funds and put it into projects, but you don't have anything available for the what in case portion of it. And so I just want to see that as part of the conversation.
Yeah, and so do I. But Mike, what happens if something happens at the reservoirs?
No. They're connected, but they are separate and they're different funds. So I'll just leave it on that one. But
Yeah.
we all have these.
And we met with the
issues.
supervisors about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
With our funds and wanting more money. And they said, you got money already in your funds. So there's a dilemma of spending it and asking for more.
Yeah. That's why you designate reserves. Honestly, that is why. All right. And one looks like water expansion.
Yeah, let me see if I can pull this up. Oh, look at that. Always amazed when that works. So, talking about Pure Water Monterey source supplies, and particularly this relates to a proposal that the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District is developing to allocate anticipated supplies from the Pure Water Monterey expansion project, which is expected to come online in the fall of 2025. So back in September, the Water Management District invited a number of people from its various jurisdictions to a workshop, went through a very good presentation about the history of allocations, about how allocations are like a bank, why now, Pure Water X, and then the process that they went through to try to ascertain, what projected growth looks like, the challenges they faced in going through that exercise, and then ultimately what their proposal is. I don't take any exception with kind of all of the math that they've done to get to the proposal. It seems very thoughtful and thorough. The concern that I have expressed at the meeting and subsequent to that is the potential for change going forward. And so the presentation that we've prepared is intended to try and summarize kind of where we are today. What is an overview of the Pure Water Monterey sources of supply? This isn't meant to be, in super detail. This is really meant to be at that 50,000 foot level that folks can try to understand. Kind of talking about our version of why now. And it really comes down to Sigma and the need to manage 180, 400 foot aquifer. And then lastly, just, talking a little bit about the Water Management District's proposed allocation. So the overview of source supplies, where we sit today, we really look back at the 2015 amended and restated water recycling agreement. That really encompassed all of the agreements that were made prior to it, And so in saying that, much of what it says were things that were decided long before 2015, right? It wasn't like everything that the 2015 agreement says was decided at that time. Some things yes, some things no. The other observation here is what a keystone that agreement is for the Pure Water Monterey project. You know, we often hear about, you know, differences between the peninsula and Salinas over water supply, but this was really, you know, a regional effort to put water to best management practice. The Water Resources Agency agreeing that when water that was allotted to it before this agreement came along, rather than putting it out to the ocean, which makes the least amount of sense, sometimes is necessary, but makes the least amount of sense, made a lot more sense to make that water available to the peninsula. And it's been a great success in that regard. The Pure Water Base project has been online for, what, over 4 years now, coming up on 5 perhaps. And again, I think it's really important for folks to remember that the Water Resources Agency, and by extension, right, its stakeholders in the Salinas Valley were really key and elemental to that project being able to stand up. The agreement itself talks about the wastewater supplies. Those kind of come pre-agreement and how they're allotted, and then talks about new incremental and interruptible allocations. So new source water, and then there was a phase 1 and phase 2 vision. I think also importantly it acknowledges, because you have to remember we're only basically 1 year past the passage of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And yet importantly it also acknowledges that with respect to the wastewater that is committed to the Resources Agency, you know, it acknowledges the ability to repurpose that water for future management of the 18400. And that, you know, I think was a very important acknowledgement at the time, especially with SGMA, you know, really in its infancy. Here we are 10 years later. We've learned a lot and we understand a lot more, and more to go. It assigns, you know, it re-articulates, if you will, the assignment of wastewater, and there are exceptions to that, right? It's not just all the wastewater. Marina Coast's wastewater, which was assigned, you know, they held on to that before the Resource Agency struck its deal. There are flows that are coming from areas outside of Monterey One Water's 2001 boundary. There are flows that are part of, you know, ordinary operations and maintenance. There was water that was assigned to Monterey One, 650 acre feet. And then, you know, the biggest variable here being the water that is sometimes deemed as excess. And this is, you know, a big driver of the source of supply for the Pure Water Monterey, both the base and the expansion, and so also the source of our concern, recognizing that the availability of that excess supply is based on this historical demand shape that's existed for quite some time, assuredly, but is going to change as we go forward and as SGMA projects begin to get implemented in the next 5 to 10 years. The new incremental and interruptible allocations, this was the phase 1. It was originally allocated volumetrically between the agency and M1, but the agreement also had what are referred to as conditions precedent, and those were not met. And so in 2022, the agency opted out of the new source water phase 1 part of the agreement. In doing so, it really changed the allocation of the new source water. It assigned it by source. So M1 is assigned water from the Blanco Drain and the reclamation ditch. Those waters are available under water rights that the agency itself holds, but that we allow Monterey One Water to use. And then the, you know, there's acknowledgement that the City of Salinas agricultural wash water is allotted to the agency. The interruptible phase 2 was a contemplation of additional flows, but those have yet to be realized. So summary, it's again important to note just how critical this agreement and the Water Resource Agency's support for this project is to standing it up, and yet the entire thing is built also around the acknowledgement that there are, you know, historical demands of senior contractual water allocation holders that may change in the future, right? Namely, the agency and Marina Coast. That would affect potentially the base supply, and then there is no committed allocation specific for expansion. It relies entirely on the excess supply and kind of the current winter outfall. And so it's variable, and this variability, we see it on an intra-weekly, intra-annual, year after year, you know, wet and dry cycles. And it's demand dependent. And this is, I think, you know, the cautionary tale that we want folks to understand as this process moves forward. It may be available today. That availability will change going into the future, and you know, that's likely to diminish over time. So the why now? The 180, 400-foot aquifer subbasin has been characterized by DWR as critically overdrafted. And so under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is to achieve sustainability by 2040, which is the short time track. And so here's the subbasin. This is just a simple illustration trying to demonstrate, you know, why do we call it 180, 400? There are in fact, you know, different layers that exist in this area. And you know, fresh water comes in from the east and moves west, and salt water's been coming in from the west. And that's been mapped by the agency beginning as early as 1944 in the 100-foot aquifer and through 2023 in both. And you can see that progression over time. It moves a little faster or a little slower, it seems, really dependent on hydrologic cycle. We find ourselves in droughts, and you can see it move. And then we find ourselves in wet periods like this, where thankfully we have the Salinas River Diversion Facility that's able to capture river water released from the reservoirs, and it makes a huge difference. And so, but the march of seawater intrusion has been with us for some time, and will likely continue. We talk about SGMA as if it's one thing. It was actually 3 different laws that were enacted in 2014. And to summarize it, it mandates sustainability. It assigns responsibility to the Department of Water Resources to establish priorities, to approve sustainability plans, monitor progress, and ultimately they're the judge and jury, right? They determine sustainability. Fortunately, SGMA provided for the formation of local groundwater sustainability agencies in lieu of county or state control. And this was a very important component. We see certain areas of the state that are struggling with their planning efforts, and the state is trying to come in and impose itself, and undoubtedly that will result in significant litigation and a lot of uncertainty going forward. We're in a much better position here, thankfully, in the Salinas Valley Basin. And then for the development of groundwater sustainability plans, these plans are aimed to implement projects and management actions to ensure sustainability on time. And so a responsibility for achieving all of this was assigned to another entity called, again, we're really good at naming things, the Salinas Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency. It was formed in 2017. It takes care of the 6 subbasins throughout the Salinas Valley Basin, and it submitted the original GSP for the 180-400 in 2020 and updates since then, with the 5-year update due here in about 2 months. So the GSP describes the basin, but importantly, it also contemplates projects and actions that are to be undertaken between now and 2040, which is only 15 years away. And those include optimizing the existing Castroville Seawater Intrusion Project, developing, to your point, Mr. Scatini, new direct delivery projects, and also is examining the development of groundwater recharge projects. So a lot of things that are being looked at as potential new demands for recycled water. CSIP is, in fact, a host of different projects, but ultimately, while we may think of it simply as an irrigation distribution system, really that's the means to the ends being to sustain the 180-400 aquifer by slowing the intrusion of seawater through the delivery of alternative water supplies in lieu of groundwater pumping. And in that regard, the project's been an enormous success. We estimate over 250,000 acre-feet of pumping has been avoided since the project came online in 1998. And so I think it's helpful for me, kind of it's, just the homage, the nod to the folks that help envision all of this beginning in the mid-1970s. We had, public, private, and academia coming together and contemplating something that was quite radical at the time, and thank goodness they did. What did they leave us? This 12,000-acre service area. And so how does water get delivered to it or to its expansions in the future? So wastewater and new source waters come into the regional treatment plant that's operated by Monterey One Water. It goes through primary and secondary treatment, and here it gets routed. And so from the time that this plant came online to 1998, that route was out to the ocean, and folks recognized, wow, there's some water here that we could be using. So beginning in 1998, it could go to the ocean, or it could go to the SVRP, the Salinas Valley Reclamation Project, for use to protect the 18400 groundwater basin. And then following the execution of the water recycling agreement and the availability of water for the Pure Water Monterey project, it was constructed by Monterey One, the advanced water treatment plant, and I think that came online in early 2020 and has been making water ever since, which has been injected into the Seaside Basin. That's been a great thing. It's put the water to higher beneficial use. B, it's helped Cal-Am meet their requirements for diminished deliveries off the Carmel River. So it's achieved a number of multiple beneficial uses. But where things may change going forward, and forgive me, the purple line here is a little hard to see on this illustration, but it represents the CSIP existing boundary. And what we see here today is that the seawater intrusion does continue. This is just another way of illustrating the map I showed earlier. The number of supplemental wells we have available to us today are fewer than what we had at the beginning of the project. And so this certainly represents an area of potential increased recycled water demand within the CSIP. But we also have a large area that's outside of the CSIP, and this will become an area of greater focus and will also be an area of increased recycled water demand, again, for the protection of the 18400 aquifer. And so this is why things are subject to change. I think folks in general can agree with that point. I think where the big disagreement lies is, when might that all happen, with some folks imagining this, to be 20 or 30 years down the road, and, our view that it's, much closer, probably in that 5 to 10 year time frame, if we are going to meet the deadlines that are established by SGMA. So to the Water Management District's proposed allocation, in their explanation of now, why now? It makes sense, the anticipation of the expansion project coming online in next year. They expect the production number there to be 2,250 new acre feet annually. And so they plug that number into a table and account for their estimation of the total supply that's available for the peninsula for use within the various jurisdictions that the Water Management District serves, which includes the unincorporated portions of the county of Monterey, particularly there, sort of in the east of Monterey, Carmel Valley sort of area. We accept at face value there are other numbers here. What we question or want to discuss about is the pure water numbers, where we have a bit more understanding. We note that these numbers are production numbers. You'll note that they're round, and so one concern that we have is they really don't reflect the potential variability that may occur in the future. It does represent nearly half of the total supply that's being stated as available, and of course this is made up of primarily of the excess water and new source water supplies. I think the issue there, the excess water, will be repurposed as we move forward over the next several years. The new source water, the agreement's been in place for 9 years now. There was a lot of contemplation about what those volumes might be. We've seen dry years, we've seen wet years in between, we've seen the base plant operating, and we have a much better understanding of sort of the supply range and the variability here. And just the way the information is presented, that isn't really clear And so that was a point of concern for us. The Water Management District estimated an annual demand, looking at the last 5 years, and explained how they calculated that. And then they talk about variability a little bit in the presentation when they're talking about total supplies. An area of difference in our calculations and theirs, they're thinking that the expansion project, may be affected by drought by, up to 350 acre feet. We think that number is likely higher, potentially 50%. And again, so we get a little worried about, not having a full understanding of the range. That said, we get to, their proposed allocation here, which is measured. And I'll back up a step here to point out, if you'll recall, there's 2,250 acre feet expected from the expansion plant. And then, some other water that the Water Management District is suggesting is available. So they're saying we've got 2,500 feet available. And they're setting aside 1,000 acre feet of that for what they call a factor of safety. I think that's a very good idea. I think this is in part a recognition of some of the uncertainty that's in front of us and some of the variability that exists. And then the reason I say that the proposal is measured is then they also propose of that remaining 1,500 acre feet to only allocate at this time, early next year, approximately a quarter of it. And I, it's not like we're rushing out and allocating everything. If this was the Water Resource Agency's proposal, we would certainly be more conservative. We would wait to see a few years of performance from the expansion project first. But this is the Water Management District's proposal. This is where they're coming. It's not an unmanageable volume of water. I think the other thing that's important to recognize here is that they're proposing that 5 years from now we take a look back and see where we are. That's a reasonable time frame for a variety of reasons. One, certainly in the Sigma world, we will be working on our third update to DWR of the GSP, and what those future projects and actions look like will be abundantly clearer. I think the other mitigating factor here is the fact that the cease and desist order on the Carmel River usage and prohibiting the installation of new meters remains in effect. That's a state Water Resource Control Board decision. We don't know when that will come about. But with that in effect, the amount to leverage this new allocation is limited. And so I think that there is, some measure in this proposal overall. The story we're really wanting to tell is, one, we want to acknowledge that all along this has been a regional project, and it's been a great success in that regard. Two, that success has been based on the understanding that some of this water is available for repurposing, and that repurposing will occur because of the demands placed upon water managers in the 18400 region for future projects to manage that aquifer. And then three, it's measured in that it's not, a huge volume of water. It's not all of it here and now, and and it recognizes the importance of stepping back and reevaluating where we are in the future. And so that concludes my presentation on that.
Thank you, Ara. Very good presentation, and I appreciate I appreciate you letting people know you have to be cautious when it comes to what the numbers are. I did have a couple questions. One was, the expansion is 2,250 acre feet, but that is what the number they expect to produce and send out. It actually takes more water than that to accomplish 2,250, correct?
Correct.
And I would imagine it also applies to the 369 acre feet they were talking about for an allocation on the last slide.
Yes.
Where they broke it down, the smaller piece. It would still take a little over 400 acre feet to accomplish that. So I think that would be important for cities to recognize and understand. The interruptible portion of it, I think, cannot be understated. the growers who put this all together, who paid for the project, who did all this to preserve the basins. And I'm glad you highlighted that, because that gets lost in a lot of talk and discussions. You know, it's all about water supply, but they forget who put up the money and who made these things possible. So connecting that dot was really nice to see. I really appreciated seeing that. And before I go to the board members, it is a very interruptible supply. I mean, literally next year, you could see a group of growers come up and say, you know what, this is our project, move forward. This is how we're going to fund it. And then all of a sudden, those waters wouldn't be available for any allocations. And so whatever they get on this, and I like that they did bring it down to something where it seems reasonable, and then come back in 5 years. But even at 369 acre feet, I mean, I personally would caution, don't make those for projects that will be long-term. Think about short-term ways to use that for right now. But board members, questions or comments? Mike? Anyone down here?
Yeah, thank you for that report. All right. And I'm glad you touched on the variability of this water. Given regulation and the changes within regulation, the Blanco drain could eventually dry up to nothing. With the Regional Water Quality Control Board and the Ag Waiver, you know, farmers are not going to clean their water to a drinking water standard and just throw it down a ditch and let it go downstream. So that water could come into question and be reutilized, and potentially less water again for M1 and the reg ditch. I don't think the amounts of water that the reg ditches produces to the extent that they estimated it to be. So I'm glad you spoke on both of those. And then what Chair LaBarre commented about pushing forward and moving for the next project. We will do it. It is going to happen sooner than later. And you know, I think that your point about the Salinas Valley and the growers putting their best foot forward, trying to take down that lettuce curtain that people have spoken about so much. You know, we've tried to do this, and I'd like to remind the peninsula that they had the opportunity to be a part of Nacimiento Dam. They had the opportunity to be a part of San Antonio Dam, and they turned down those opportunities. They didn't want any part of it. So again, the Valley has put our best foot forward at all times to try to help when we can. But at the same time, we can't solve one problem while creating another problem. And with the new regulation with Sigma, we have to take care of our own valley as well. And we are going to have to do that. By law, we're required to. So Salinas Valley's got a lot of water. I don't think we have a water shortage. We had a water storage and distribution problem. But those are better problems to have than some areas where they have absolutely no water. So, thank you.
Jason? Oh. Any other comments? All right. Legislative update, I think that's it, right? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, just one other observation. So to Director Scatini's point that, you know, we have not necessarily a water quantity problem, but a water timing problem. Yeah, I think that's important to recognize. And again, getting back to the variability of these source supplies, we know there'll be times when there'll be supply available for Pure Water Monterey, and we anticipate there'll be times it will be less. And so to your point about, you know, if you get this allocation, what do you do about it? You know, and building the drought bank in the Seaside Basin to be more robust than it is today is an example, perhaps developing some sort of water exchange program. There are creative things that could be done, you know, to utilize this water in such a way where, you know, if there are changes down the road and when they come, we're not stuck in some hard spot. We have that flexibility to adapt.
Yeah, and I know you've mentioned this before, and I think it's important to reiterate is that there is no magic water project that will solve Monterey County's issues, but it is a series of components. M1W, pure water expansion, our reservoirs, CSIP, all of these things are those things that will make it. Hopefully there'll be desal in the future that can provide other new source waters. And that's how we're going to get to where we need to be. All right, legislative update?
Just something quick. Of course, we've had the election since then, and we'll continue to see how that changes things in early of 2025, significantly, I imagine. But in the meantime, there was an effort underway to propose an amendment to WIFIA, which is a federal low-income or low-interest loan program that we are exploring in terms of funding our dam safety projects that attempts to do a number of things, open access to it, but importantly for us, extend the time frame for repayment, provide technical support in the application process, and then also make project size smaller. And so for some of our ag, unincorporated disadvantaged communities, open up eligibility for them. So we were asked to consider signing on a coalition letter. This came up like at the very end of last week, so I did take it to P&A for their advice. They were supportive of moving forward for this, and so I included the letter that we signed on to for those reasons.
All right, thank you. Yep. Any member of the public have any comments on items discussed? See none in chambers. Is there anyone online?
No hands raised.
Right.
And then as for other, Mike, just real quickly, just sort of previewing a little bit. In December, we will have the update for the habitat conservation planning effort. We just had a technical advisory committee meeting late last week, so we weren't able to get it on this agenda, but that's upcoming. And then in January, we'll start to get busy with different work products that we've been reporting on for several months now, including the update to the historical benefits analysis, the draft engineer's report for the Interlake Tunnel project, and we'll see the initial draft for the groundwater monitoring program regulatory fee. So January will be a busy month, and just heads up.
All right, thank you.
Plan your vacations accordingly.
And so we'll move to committee reports. Do any of the committee chairs have anything to report out? John? All right. With that, we have our informational items that are attached to the agenda. So we'll adjourn at 2:40 p.m. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your attendance. What? Oh, did I miss? What?
Our director comments.
Oh, you know what? Sorry. It is right there at the bottom. I missed it. So, reopen real quickly because I missed something. Board member comments. Yes, please.
Thank you very much, staff. We did some really good, informative presentations today. And so on a slightly negative note, I noticed that there's additional invasive mussels that are impacting water in the United States. And so it's not a time to let our guard down. You got the Asian green mussel and one of the other ones that's showing up. And so I just pray that I go to the res ops. I get a lot of confidence hearing what the residents down at the reservoir are doing, and then what the parks people and the resort people are doing. But boy, I tell you what, this is not a time to let our guard down.
Thank you. Any other board member have comments?
Was everybody happy?
Go ahead, Mark. Oh, thank you. Mark?
Same thing. Wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and hopefully this rain event doesn't interrupt staff's couple days off. We need the rain, but we don't. Give us a few days, all right? But other than that, thank you.
And thank you for bringing up Thanksgiving. I forgot about that. All right, we'll adjourn at 2:42 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.